My wife texted, "Divorce papers are coming next week." I replied calmly, "Already submitted mine." I locked in our prenup and shifted all assets solo. 48 hours later, her attorney was freaking out on the call. It was a Thursday morning when my wife, Lauren, texted me, "Divorce papers are coming next week." Just like that. No build-up, no warning. We'd been married for 6 years. Together for almost 9. Things hadn't been perfect. They never are, but we'd weathered a lot. Or at least I thought we had. We met in grad school. She studied marketing. I was deep into finance. I'd always been the planner, the guy with spreadsheets for vacations and savings targets. Lauren was impulsive, charming, the kind of person who could turn any situation into a story. That balance worked for a while. I stabilized her. She loosened me up. Until the last year, when she started working for a startup run by a guy named Evan. He was everything I wasn't. Loud, magnetic, always networking. She started coming home late, smelling like the wine bars she swore she hated. I asked once, gently, if something was going on. She laughed. "Please. He's practically married. We're just hustling." I let it go. But then the late nights turned into weekends. The client dinners turned into "don't wait up." And now, a text message. "Divorce papers are coming next week." I remember staring at my phone, finishing my coffee, and feeling something odd. Not anger, not heartbreak, just clarity. Because for months, I'd been quietly documenting everything. See, I work in corporate finance. I deal with mergers, contracts, and asset protection. When Lauren started acting strange, I didn't confront her. I reviewed our prenup. It was ironclad, drafted before we married, when she insisted she didn't care about money. I'd offered generous terms back then, a fair split of joint assets, but everything I'd built before the marriage stayed mine. And over the last few months, I'd been quietly shifting everything out of joint. The house, technically owned by my LLC now, which I used for consulting income. The cars, one leased under the company, one fully in my name. The joint checking, I'd been transferring the bulk of my deposits into a personal investment account, legal under our agreement, since it was funded by pre-marriage capital. And the prenup? It explicitly stated that any debts or expenditures made after filing for divorce were the responsibility of the individual, not the marital estate. So when she sent that text, I replied, "Already submitted mine." Because I had that morning. Electronically, through my attorney. Signed, time-stamped, and filed. 2 days later, her attorney called mine. I was on the call. The man sounded like he'd just seen a ghost. "Mr. Reynolds," he started. "We were under the impression your client hadn't filed yet." My attorney said, "He filed 48 hours ago. The documents are complete and include evidence supporting the clause activation regarding separate assets." The line went quiet. Then the lawyer muttered, "I see, that changes things." Lauren's voice broke in from the background. She was on speaker. "What the hell does that mean?" Her attorney sighed. "It means, Lauren, you're locked out of joint assets effective the date of filing." She exploded. "You did this behind my back." I said, calm as a surgeon, "You texted me about divorce. I just took you at your word." She hung up. That night, I got a barrage of texts. Angry, then desperate, then manipulative. "You blindsided me. We could have done this together. You're seriously going to ruin me over this?" I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the texts to my lawyer, documentation, in case things got uglier. Because I had a feeling they would. The next week, a friend of Lauren's, someone I'd always liked, sent me a DM on Instagram. "Hey, you should know she's been seeing Evan." Like, actually seeing him. "I thought you knew." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because that same day, I'd gotten something else. A copy of a corporate card statement Lauren had been using for her startup. A card that had been billed to our joint address. The charges were illuminating. Hotel stays, wellness retreats, 2 flights to Miami, all labeled client expenses. But I recognized the dates. They lined up perfectly with weekends she told me she was working overtime. I sent everything to my lawyer. He said, "You want to play this quiet, or you want to go nuclear?" I said quiet. Always quiet. Because people who set fires usually burn themselves faster than you could ever push them. The morning after that call, Lauren showed up at the house. No warning. Just her black SUV pulling into the driveway like she still lived there. She still had a key, technically, though my attorney had advised me to change the locks as soon as the papers were filed. So I did. She tried the door. It didn't open. Then came the pounding. Are you serious, Matt? You're locking me out. I didn't open. I stood in the kitchen, calm, coffee in hand, watching her through the window. It was the kind of silence you get after a storm. No noise, just the hum of something that used to be chaos finally settling into order. She yelled again. You can't do this. This is my house too. I finally answered through the door. No, Lauren. It's a company asset now. There was a long pause. Then, you're unbelievable. I wanted to say so are you. But instead, I just turned and went back to my laptop. Her lawyer sent a demand letter that afternoon, claiming I'd fraudulently transferred assets. My lawyer laughed when he read it. She doesn't understand, he said. You moved those before any divorce proceedings were mentioned. There's a paper trail, timestamps, and a prenup clause confirming your right to reorganize. They're not getting a cent. He was right. Every move I'd made had been logged and dated months earlier. I hadn't hidden anything. I just acted early. But Lauren didn't know that yet. She thought she was playing checkers. I was playing chess with a digital clock running. 2 days later, she posted on Instagram a long, melodramatic story about betrayal, control, and how I'd financially trapped her. Friends of hers started DMing me, some curious, some hostile. I ignored most of them, but a few mutual friends sent me screenshots. One story stood out. She'd tagged her boss, Evan, and written, "At least some men know how to appreciate me." That was the moment I realized something. She wasn't just mad. She was desperate for narrative control. So I stayed silent. Because silence lets people dig their own graves. And she was halfway in already. That weekend, my lawyer forwarded me an email from hers. Client requests mediation. Claims husband's pre-filing actions were retaliatory and financially coercive. I asked what he thought. He smirked. It means she knows she's cornered. We agreed to meet for mediation the next Tuesday. She arrived in a beige suit, all composed confidence, sitting across from me at the long oak table. Evan wasn't there, but her lawyer was, and he looked like he hadn't slept. They started off all polite, talking about amicable resolution. Then her attorney said, Lauren feels the current division doesn't reflect the spirit of the marriage. My lawyer slid a folder across the table. Inside, credit card records, flight receipts, text logs, and a timeline of her business trips. Her lawyer's face drained of color. These are from before the filing? He asked quietly. All documented, my lawyer said. Dated, backed up, and cross-referenced with her own card statements. Lauren stared at the papers, her eyes darting from one charge to another. For a second, she tried to hold the performance, the practiced composure, but it cracked. You went through my private stuff? I said. You charged your private stuff to our address. She didn't have an answer for that. That night, I got a message from her, short, angry, like she'd written it through tears. You wanted to humiliate me. Congrats. You win. I didn't reply, because there was nothing to win. All I ever wanted was peace, and all she'd done was prove why I couldn't have it with her. Then came the twist I didn't expect. 3 days later, my lawyer called me laughing so hard, he had to catch his breath. You won't believe this, he said. Her attorney just called. She's firing him. Apparently, she blames him for not protecting her assets. She's burning through her own team? I asked. She's imploding, he said. And Evan's company just got a subpoena for misuse of funds. Someone must have tipped off the investors. I hadn't said a word. But apparently, when you post your private life all over social media, other people start to connect the dots themselves. A week later, Lauren texted me again. This time, no anger. Can we meet? Just to talk. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat on my porch, looked at the quiet house, the calm yard, and thought about how noise always finds its way back to silence. Update 1: the next talk didn't happen in person. It happened over email, through her new attorney. Apparently, she'd finally realized she couldn't bully her way back into my life. So now the strategy was guilt. The subject line literally read, "Seeking a dignified resolution." I opened it out of curiosity. The body was a mix of veiled accusations and emotional language. Lauren acknowledges her actions caused emotional distress, but she feels the financial consequences are disproportionate. She hopes you'll consider revising the settlement in light of your shared history. Translation: she's out of money and options. By this point, the prenup enforcement was nearly finalized. Her spending records, the hotel bills, the flights, all tied back to that same company card, And once the startup's investors started auditing, the story started collapsing publicly. Word was, Evan had stepped down temporarily. Investors were reviewing internal practices. Lauren's name wasn't in the reports, but anyone who'd seen her Instagram knew she was part of it. And me? I was staying invisible. It's strange how quiet the world gets when people stop defending themselves. Her friends who used to comment "Queen Energy" under every dramatic post went silent. Mutual acquaintances started checking in with me like they weren't sure what side they'd been on all along. One night, I went through our old photos, the vacations, the parties, the random Sunday breakfasts. I wasn't nostalgic. I was studying them like evidence, trying to pinpoint where the switch flipped. There wasn't a single moment. It was a slow rot. Little lies stacked under smiles, delayed texts, excuses dressed as independence. I used to think betrayal came with fireworks. Turns out it comes with quiet consistency. Then, out of nowhere, I got a voicemail from her. "Matt, I know you hate me. I get it. But please, can you at least stop whatever you did to the company? They think I leaked stuff. I didn't. Please. I didn't delete it. I just saved the file and sent a copy to my lawyer, evidence of admission." Because in every legal sense, she was now connecting her downfall to the financial misconduct tied to Evan's firm. My lawyer's response was cold. "Do not reply. Any contact could be interpreted as harassment or coercion." So I didn't. A few days later, I got a call from the investigator working with the startup's board. They asked if I'd be willing to provide documentation verifying the transactions Lauren had made while claiming business expenses. They'd already gotten copies through formal subpoenas, but they wanted confirmation. I said, "Of course. I just want this over." The investigator hesitated. "Off the record, you're not the first husband we've heard from about Evan." I didn't respond to that. I just thanked him and hung up. It felt surreal, like my personal nightmare had merged with some corporate scandal I never wanted to be part of. But there was something about watching it unfold, slowly, bureaucratically, publicly, that brought a strange kind of peace. Not satisfaction, not revenge. Just the quiet knowledge that I didn't have to do anything. Truth doesn't need a speech. It just needs time and documentation. By the end of that month, Lauren had moved out of state, supposedly to start over. I only found out because one of her old co-workers messaged me. "She's gone, man. Sold her stuff, closed her socials. Guess the world got too loud for her." I didn't reply. I just sat there for a long while, rereading the message, realizing I didn't feel anger or pity or even victory. Just exhaustion. The kind that comes from finally setting something heavy down and realizing you've been carrying it for years. Final update that it's been 11 months since that first text. Divorce papers are coming next week. I thought that would be the day everything fell apart. Turns out, it was the day everything started to untangle. The divorce was finalized quietly, without drama. The prenup held. Every clause, every timestamp, every word. Lauren's lawyer tried one last appeal, claiming I'd weaponized my professional knowledge. The judge took one look at the evidence and said, "It's not weaponization to understand what you signed." That was the end. She walked out of the courtroom without looking at me. I didn't chase her. I didn't even stand. My lawyer packed up the folders, smiled faintly, and said, "Congratulations. You just survived the slowest car crash imaginable." The story about her and Evan eventually surfaced. Not the full scandal, but enough to make noise in local business circles. Their company got bought out by a competitor. He vanished into consulting. As for her, I heard bits and pieces. She was freelancing, moved somewhere in the Southwest, off social media, off the radar. For months, I didn't think about her. Then one evening, I got a single email. No greeting, no subject line. Just, "I'm sorry. I think I mistook control for love." I read it twice. Then a third time. It wasn't closure. It wasn't redemption. It was acknowledgement. Too late, but real. I didn't reply. I just archived it. People ask what I learned from all this. I used to give the easy answers. Trust, but verify. Get everything in writing. Never ignore the small lies. But truthfully, the biggest thing I learned is that peace isn't free. It costs time, boundaries, and the courage to walk away without theatrics. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was learning to live without the noise, the constant high of trying to fix, prove, justify. I started sleeping better. I rebuilt my house, physically and mentally. I went back to hiking on weekends, started reading again, Reconnected with friends I'd quietly lost while trying to hold a relationship together that was already leaking at the seams. For the first time in years, I stopped checking my phone expecting chaos. Last month, I was having dinner with my sister. She asked if she came back, said she'd changed. Would you talk to her? I thought about it for a long moment and said, maybe I'd listen, but not to reconcile, to remember. Because that's what these stories really are, not revenge, not triumph. Just reminders that sometimes the calmest version of yourself is the one that walks away first. When I finally closed that chapter, I backed up every file, every document, every receipt, and locked them in a drive. Not out of spite, out of habit. Then I made a new folder on my desktop. I named it Future. It's empty for now, but this time, that feels exactly right.